So welcome everyone to Violet Hour. My name is Greg Newton and I am coming to you from New York City. I'm the co-founder with my partner Donnie Jokum of the Bureau of General Services Queer Division. And we are a queer bookstore in Manhattan in the LGBT Community Center at 208 West 13th Street. As far as our lengthy, complicated name goes, we like to say that we're a government agency for a government that does not yet exist. And we provide services for queer people who are in New York or visiting New York. And the main service that we provide is just holding a space for queer culture, queer books. So we're a queer bookstore open Wednesdays through Sundays from 1 to 7 p.m. And often we're open later than that when we have an in-person event. And we also have exhibitions. Right now we have a beautiful art exhibition by Catalina Schliebener Munoz called Satanic Panic, which is a little bit of Satan, a little bit of Disney, and a whole lot of fun. So come check that out. I will also share some links in the chat as far as for ordering books by the authors who are reading tonight. Unfortunately, because we are based in the US and the system we use for shipping is in the US, so it's US only. But you can surely go to bookshop.org and order books by these folks and get them shipped to you if you are in Canada or elsewhere in the world. I think that's all I need to say. I'm going to introduce Christopher DiRaddo, and then we're going to jump right into the readings. So Christopher DiRaddo is the author of the novels The Family Way and The Geography of Pluto. In 2014, he created the Violet Hour reading series and book club, which has to date provided a platform for more than 200 LGBTQ writers. Please give him a warm and visible welcome. Thank you, Chris. And thank you for organizing this.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you for hosting us. Yep, as you said, my name is Christopher DiRaddo. Thanks for joining us today. I'm calling in from Montreal, Canada, which is known as Tiohtià:ke in the Mohawk language. Violet Hour has been operating since about 8 years now, and we operate on the unceded lands of the Kanien'kehá:ka people. And before we begin tonight, I just wanted to acknowledge the Indigenous peoples who have been here before me. Montreal has long been known as a gathering place for many First Nations people, and I'm very grateful to be gathering with you all here tonight online. If you've never been to the Violet Hour before, let me tell you a little bit about it. In 2002, Montreal lost its legendary LGBTQ bookstore called Landregen, and it was founded in 1973 by a collective. The store specialized in LGBTQ literature, feminist literature, and non-sexist children's books, stocking titles in both English and French. Being one of the very few places outside of bars in Montreal where queer people could congregate, Landregen also became a center of cultural and political activity. I discovered it myself in 1994. As a young gay man and an aspiring writer, the place was a haven for me. I quickly became friends with the staff, devouring queer literature and daydreaming about one day seeing my own book, maybe on one of the shelves. Unfortunately, that never got to happen because, like so many bookstores of that era, they had to close their doors at the beginning of the millennium. I did write a book, though, The Geography of Pluto. My first book came out in 2014. And in those 12 years between, the closing of Landregen and the first Violet Hour, I found that there were few opportunities for queer writers to bring their books to new audiences in Montreal, and the few places where, and also few places where queer readers could just discover new books. And when my book came out, there was no place for me to bring my book in the city, like no invitations to festivals, no opportunities to read my work in the city. And I noticed it wasn't just me, other queer writers in Montreal had books coming out, and as well as writers in other Canadian cities, they didn't really have an opportunity to come and bring their book to Montreal. And I'm really impressed with the output in Canada. I find in Canada, actually, we do publish a lot of our queer writers. And so I wanted to create a bit of a rallying point to be able to bring people together and an opportunity to connect and share. So since 2014, Violet Hour has tried to fill that hole, taking place every 2 months or so. It takes place at a strip club in Montreal's Gay Village during its off hours. And as you mentioned in my intro there, Greg, like we've had more than 200 writers in the 8 years since it launched, and it's such a joy to be able to see people continue to come out, discover new writers, discover new books, make new connections, all around a shared love of literature. So I thank you all tonight for being a part of that legacy. Before we begin, though, I do want to extend my thanks to Greg and the team at the Bureau of General Services Queer Division for not only hosting us, but also for all the hard work you do. Like those early days of Landrogin, I know that you were all volunteers and that you run the center on your love of books and writing and ideas. And I want to thank you for providing us queer writers with a venue and a platform tonight. You are creating a nurturing community, and I am grateful for that. Tonight, we have a sample of new writing from Canada. We'll be hearing from Suzette Mayr, Matthew James Weigel, and Jane Walsh. It's always a little hard to go first. To warm us up, I thought I would do a reading. As I mentioned, my first book was The Geography of Pluto, came out in 2014, but my second novel, The Family Way, came out in 2021, and that's what I'm going to read tonight. So what you need to know is that, this is a book that's mainly about its characters, and it's about chosen family. My main characters are a gay male couple, Michael and Paul. They're a gay couple living in Montreal. Paul is older than Michael, and they have two cats, because the cats are mentioned in the book, Malone and Sutherland. My own cat passed away this week, which was very sad. And I've chosen this excerpt also in his honor. He was very kind of much of an inspiration for me. And, of course, he found his way into my book. So I felt like tonight I would kind of honor him by reading this tonight. One other thing I guess you need to know too, Paul has been asked to help start a family with his friends, Wendy and Eve, who live in Toronto. And in this scene, he is just returning home from his first try. His partner, Michael, just stayed behind, didn't go on that trip, as he's having a visit from his own mother, Ellen, who has recently just left her husband. And then I think lastly, the only thing you need to know is that Paul and Michael have this weird habit of barking to one another when they come home on the stairs. We all have weird things as couples that we do with our significant other. And so that's something that they do. So, all right, here we go. That evening, I flew back to Montreal. It was Sunday night, and it felt like the whole weekend had never happened. As I climbed the stairs to our home, I started to bark, but I didn't hear any barks come back. I opened the door to find Michael at the kitchen table with his mom, painting her nails a light blue. "Hello, Paul," she said, a big grin on her face. I'd get up to give you a kiss, but my hands are busy." "Nice color," I said, and kissed Michael on the head. "Hello, buddy." "Hi, buddy." Michael was intent on his job, his eyes focused on the tips of his mother's nails. "It's periwinkle." "No barks?" I asked. Barks are only for work days." "Well, this weekend felt like work." "How was the flight?" Michael asked. "Not as bad as the one there, but I'm sure it still shaved a year off my life." "Hello, Ellen," I said, and kissed Michael's mother on both cheeks, her hand still with her son. "Welcome home," she said. Was it a success?" I shot Michael a look. "I had to tell her," he said, caught. "We were running out of things to talk about." "I'm happy for the both of you," she said. "Your friends chose a great guy to father their child. Your own dad must be thrilled." I was annoyed that Michael had told his mother, especially since I hadn't told my own father yet. But I was too charmed by Ellen's excitement to care, this woman that thought of Malone and Sutherland as grandchildren. "So how did it go?" Michael asked. "Fine," I said, and told them about the trip, the attempts, and the lunch with a lesbian motherhood. "It's a waiting game now. I guess we'll know in the next 2 weeks." "I can't believe how modern this all is," Ellen began, blowing on the nails in her left hand. "Your life is so fabulous." Michael looked to his mother. "Please don't say the word fabulous, Ellen." I headed into the kitchen to get water. It bothered me that Michael called his mother by her first name. I couldn't help thinking of it as a sign of disrespect, but despite my objections, I knew that Michael had his reasons. When I first called him on it, Michael explained that it was a way for him to attempt to have an adult relationship with his mom, so he wouldn't be made to feel like a child in her presence. I knew that Michael had a very different experience with his folks than I did with mine. When your parents help you through rehab, it changes things. "And how are you, Ellen?" I said, pouring myself a glass of water and sitting with them. This was the second time I was meeting Michael's mother, having first met her when she came to check up on her son during the first 3 months of our relationship. Still, she and I communicated over the years, through Christmas and birthday cards, text messages, and phone calls. She looked much the same as she had the last time, short and stout, with bright white hair and light brown freckles scattered across her cheeks and forehead. I'm fine, she said. I've been reading a lot. I've started taking yoga, and I took an Italian cooking course. I appreciate you letting me stay here a couple of days. We wouldn't have it any other way, I said. I hope the couch is comfortable. I'm sorry we don't have a guest room. Oh, no, please. The couch is divine, she said, as if our living room was a suite at the Ritz. I love your place. It's such a wise investment property. Michael took me on a tour of your neighborhood today, and you're close to all these great looking shops and restaurants. Did Michael take you to Cafe Manelli? He did. She looked back at her son, proud. Such a cute place. You guys must have so much fun living here. Ellen looked around the room. You know, if I was 30 years younger, I'd want to live in a place like this. But you can live in a place like this, Michael pleaded. I was sure that they had talked all weekend about her future, now that she had left Michael's father. You could get a one-bedroom place like this somewhere within walking distance to a main transit line and a grocery store. Are you thinking of moving to Montreal? I asked. No, Michael answered for her. She's thinking of going back to my dad. Michael's mom interjected. No, I didn't say I was going back to your father. I'm exploring my options. Ellen looked to me. I don't know what I want to do, Paul. It's a battle between my heart and my head. I want to be on my own, but I also feel for Michael's father. He keeps calling me and sending me messages apologizing for his temper. He says he's going to see someone about it, work on himself, but I don't know. She looked at the flip phone beside her. I just need my space now. How is this going to be different from any other time? Michael said, putting the applicator back into its bottle. Don't touch anything, he ordered. I still have to put on the top coat. Michael stood up and went to the fridge to refill his water glass. He does this every time, takes advantage of you and treats you like dirt until you do something about it and then leave him. Then he realizes he can't do anything on his own and turns on the charm so you'll come running back. Ellen opened her mouth to say something but didn't. Instead, she sighed into her palm. I wish you had moved out with me when I was 18, Michael said. You were so close to doing it, remember? I was even looking at places with 2 bedrooms. Had you come with me, you wouldn't be in the situation you are in now. There was nothing for his mother to say. She sighed again and looked exasperated. Thankfully, Malone chose a moment to jump up onto the chair that Michael had just vacated. Good, Michael said. Sorry. How are the boys, I said, scratching behind Malone's ears. Good, Michael said. But Malone bit me last night. Michael showed me the 2 red dots on the back of his hand. It looked swollen. That doesn't look good. What happened? It's fine. It was my fault. Michael shooed the cat off the chair and then sat back down to finish his mother's nails. He was on the bed and it was dark and I didn't see him. He's been gnawing on his paws again, too. I grabbed Malone and lifted him up to check his front paws. The fur around them was shorn to the skin, making it look like he had been freed after months in shackles. Strange. Why do you think that is? Ellen said. I don't know, Michael said. Some sort of PTSD? You know he was abandoned, right? With no claws in a barn one winter. Who does that to a cat? He had to fight for food and defend himself against the other barn cats. When we first got him, he was all scratched up and his face was red and puffy. But look at you now, buddy, Michael said, addressing Malone in my arms. Who's a happy cat? I put the cat down on another chair and petted him. Maybe I should get a cat, Ellen said. His fur is so soft and clean and he's always grooming himself. It's because he's happy, Michael said. Happy cats take care of themselves. I looked at my watch. It was only 9:30, but I was tired from the travel and work, would come fast the next morning. I'm going to go shower and unwind. You feel like watching TV? Oh, no, I'll read up and go to bed, Ellen said. Unless, of course, you want to stay up. I feel bad for taking over your living room. No, it's fine, I said. We often watch stuff in our bed on our laptop. Michael, you staying up? I'm going to go have a joint while you take your shower. I'll meet you in bed. He put the finishing touches on his mother's nails. There, he said. Thank you, Michael. They're beautiful. Michael tightened the cap on the bottle and kissed me on his way to the office. Malone followed him out of the room. Ellen stayed sitting at the table looking at her nails while I moved over to get a towel from the hall closet. It's such a beautiful place, Paul, she said again, looking at the walls of her kitchen. Michael is lucky to have found you. I blushed. Oh, I'm the lucky one. Ellen looked down the hall to make sure Michael wasn't around. How's he doing, she asked. Really? He's fine, I said. Concerned about you, of course. He wants you to be happy. Oh, I know. He's my knight in shining armor. Besides that, he's good. Work is slow, but it'll pick up. It's perfect that he landed that gig at the coffee shop. Michael's been drawing again, too, which is great. He's so talented. I saw a notice about his taxes, she said. I didn't tell him I saw it, of course. I know I shouldn't have snooped, but I couldn't help it when I saw it on the table. I'm his mother. I can't help but worry. Don't, I said. Michael will be fine. He's trying to stick to a budget, paying down what he owes. It might take him a while to pay everything off, but he'll do it. I wish I could help, she said, but I don't even know what I'm going to do. She looked at her nails, then up at me. I know you help him out too, Paul, and we're grateful for that. I guess I'm surprised he even did his taxes. He avoided them for so many years. Well, I didn't give him that much of a choice. Well, the fact that you got him to do anything about it is a miracle. Paul, I don't say this enough, but I'm glad that Michael has you in his life. I know he hasn't had it easy with his hearing loss and the troubles he has had at school, not to mention the drugs and the conflict with his brothers and his father. His brothers used to really use him as a punching bag growing up. I kicked myself for not knowing what was going on back then. But I'm happy to see that he's been able to put much of that behind him and that he's in a stable relationship now with someone who loves him and looks out for him, especially when I'm so far away. I had never heard Ellen talk like this before, had hardly heard Michael talk about his past either. I think I knew he would have a hard life, she continued. I don't know why we chose the name Michael, but I suppose it fits. Michael, like the archangel who wrestles the devil. I'm happy he has you, Paul. Whatever happens between me and his dad, I'm grateful that he has you in his life. I was speechless. I didn't know what to say, so I thanked her and said goodnight, kissing her on top of her head while she sat at the table waiting for her nails to dry. So thank you. Thank you very much. All right, now, so hopefully we're all sufficiently warmed up right now. We're going to move to our next reader, Suzette Mayr. Suzette is the author of 6 novels, including her most recent, The Sleeping Car Porter, which is currently shortlisted for the Scotiabank Giller Prize, the most prestigious literary award in Canada. Her fourth novel, Monoceros, won the Rillet Award and the City of Calgary W.O. Mitchell Book Prize. The book was also nominated for a Farrow Brumley Award for LGBT fiction and also longlisted for the Giller Prize. Suzette's fiction has been nominated for the Commonwealth Writers' Prize for Best Book in the Canadian Caribbean region, the Writers Guild of Alberta's Best First Book and Best Novel Awards. Please welcome Suzette.
Thank you so much. And it's such an honor to be here. And thank you for inviting me to this. I'm so happy. So I'm going to read from The Sleeping Car Porter, my brand new book. And I'll read from the beginning, so I don't have to do a bunch of setup. But I guess what you should know is that it's set in 1929. And it is about a sleeping car porter who is trapped on a delayed train trip between Montreal and Vancouver. So he gets trapped in a mudslide in the Rockies. And he's also in the closet. So he faces other challenges as well. So this is just from the beginning. Toronto to Winnipeg, Monday, 10:45 p.m. Eastern, to Wednesday, 9:15 p.m. Central. 9:45 p.m. Standing next to his step box, Baxter hovers, immobile and elastic, ready to spring forward to lift a suitcase, dissect a timetable, point to the conductor, nod, lift more suitcases, now hat boxes, answer more questions, and nod, nod, nod. Trouser cuffs drag in the dust. Shiny boot heels clap against the train station platform. A child runs towards an observation car. Ribbons and cufflinks and tickets and goodbye letters swish to the ground. Hands reach towards him, grab at him for a lift up, grab his coat pocket, wave in his face. A sea swell of passengers spilling towards his car, a maelstrom of departure time panic. R.T. Baxter, dentist to be. Man who longs to lance gums and extract pathological third molars, standing here next to this train, caught in this hurricane, drowsy already. Boarding Baxter's train car, pushing past a mother squeezing the elbows of her child, a man shaped like a heart, shaped like a mango, pauses on the step box before alighting into the car. Mango hooks his index finger in the air, parts his dry lips, but no sound, no question mark comes out. You're in compartment C, sir, says Baxter, even though the conductor just told that to the passenger. Baxter's not sure what more the passenger might want to know right now, or what the silent hooked finger might mean. "Welcome aboard," says Baxter. "Midnight," Mango says. Then he slips the finger into a breast pocket and slides out a business card. He flips the card to Baxter. The profession says optician. On the back, the passenger has printed in tiny letters, midnight, not a minute later. The card's sharp corners jab Baxter's fingertips. Baxter will still be coaxing passengers to settle into their berths at midnight. He'll be tripping over pillows and pajamas at midnight. He has a shadowy idea about what the man's tiny and precise lettering means, but passengers can also be shifty creatures, affably baring their teeth one moment, but in the next doing so wickedly. Baxter has no time to play a personal Dorothy Dix and listen to Mango's nighttime confessions about a moldering love affair or profligate brother during the time Baxter needs to black boots and fill out reports. Passengers will still be toppling around drunk or ringing at him for the ladder or meandering back and forth to the toilet, back and forth, pestering him to ask, "When will the train pass through Octopus?" Or, "Why has the train slowed down?" As if he rides on top of the train when he's out of their sight. Maybe Mango the optician can scoop out Baxter's human eyes and pop owl telescope eyes into Baxter's eye sockets instead. Feathers drift before Baxter's eyes. He blinks them away, rubs his glasses with a handkerchief. Not feathers. Hardly any sleep last night. No sleep for 2 nights on the run before this, and now his eyeballs are fogging up. He slides the optician's card into his breast pocket. Baxter fills out reports and heaves boxes up and down and up, trips over pillows and pajamas as he checks every berth, every compartment, notes who needs their shoes polished and who's already been drinking so hard they'll never find their way down the very straight, very narrow passageway. At 11:59 p.m., Baxter presses the pearly doorbell to compartment C. Mango opens the door, a cigar smoldering in his mouth, the smoke and the smell in the compartment smashing through the doorway, the shoulders on his top heavy body filling the doorway. "Right on time," says Mango, smoke puffing with each word. He jabs a $5 bill at Baxter, and Baxter reaches for it, dizzy at the gargantuan amount of money. Mango jerks it back and rips it in 2. He offers 1/2 to Baxter and winks, his lips sneering around the cigar. Time lashes to a stop. Mango is one of those nasty types, one who wants Baxter as an alibi or witness for some stupid or terrible thing he hasn't done yet, but he knows he's going to do. Baxter folds the half bill in 2, slides its foulness into his uniform breast pocket. Baxter remembers that mangoes have big, obtrusive pits. "The other half at the end of the trip," Mango murmurs to Baxter and claps him on the shoulder. Long hairs prickle out of the passenger's nostrils, his ear holes. Baxter's seen men like him before. He's not seen them too. His porter instructor, Edwin Drew, told him all about men like this. Love diplomats, he called them. "Here," Mango says, "you forgot these." He shoves a pair of shoes at Baxter, their insides moist and stinking. Then he shuts the compartment door, banging it into Baxter's toe. Baxter tucks more passengers into their beds, wipes up water splashed around the wash basins. He fetches extra towels. His twin reflection bustles in white jacketed circles in the mirrors, sweat droplets pocking its forehead, its face long and thin, eyeglasses glinting. The second hour of a nearly 48-hour run, and he already wants to curl up and blow away. Baxter knocks dirt from the soles of Mango's shoes, swipes his brush back and forth on the toes, on the heels, along the sides, dabs and rubs shoe shine paste and water into the toes, rubs with a rag until the leather gleams, the shoe leather stiff and bright. Baxter taps his fingers along the ornate stitching and broguing just for a moment. He slides the shoes into the tiny locker beside Mango's door. He sits back down on his stool and shines other passengers' shoes and boots, his fingernails grubby with paste, shining his way into the flattest part of the night when he can pack up his shoe shine kit, when he can set up his own bed, when even the fussiest of passengers are dreaming past their need to ring for a porter. Still, every so often, the bell on his call board summons him, and he moves the ladder to an upper berth so a passenger can descend for a midnight visit to the lavatory or other hijinks, or climb up like a drunk, sleepy squirrel. The night slides by outside the train windows, the rocking and swaying of the car. Baxter rubs his eyes so hard that aurora borealis undulate inside his eyelids. At 2:00 a.m., in the smoker compartment next to the WC, he pulls out a sliver-thin mattress and fits it on top of the sofa. He stretches out on the mattress, his head sagging sideways into sleep. His fingers scrabble for a sheet to pull up to his neck. Then his fingers remember he forgot to put on a sheet. He also forgot to ask the porter in the next car to cover for him. He needs to stand up. He needs to straighten up. He plummets backwards into sleep. The bell clangs him awake after only 20 minutes. He totters to his feet. A late-night tomcat wearing nothing but pajamas and a trench coat staggers intoxicated up into one of the empty upper berths while Baxter grips the ladder steady. The tomcat was trying to scramble up into his upper berth by himself, stepping and kicking all over the lower berth. The man in the lower pressed the bell to call Baxter, then burrowed himself back in. "Thank you very much," whispers the drunk, pulling the blanket up to his armpits. "Porter," he hisses, "porter. Look at this. Look at what I got." Mr. Lickerhead props himself up on an elbow. He rustles inside his pajama pocket and pulls out a tattered, much-thumbed postcard and slides it to Baxter. He giggles. Baxter peers at the card through the dim. Two women, clothed in nothing but stockings, flop together on a Chesterfield. "Got it from France," says Lickerhead. "Paris." Baxter smooths the ragged, smutty card on the edge of the mattress. Sweat slithers out onto his forehead, on the back of his neck. One lady's white teeth line her lips like tiny flower petals. He hovers there, perched on the ladder's bottom step as he frantically grubs in his head for what he can pretend. He can't pretend interest, not even for the biggest tip in the world. He doesn't want to get fired or beaten to death for leering at a naked white lady, and he doesn't want to earn demerit points for undue familiarity with this passenger. He can't pretend nausea. No, that wouldn't do. Lickerhead frowns, huffs his disapproval when Baxter doesn't whistle or titter at the smutty outrageousness of the card, huffs his annoyance because Baxter so far registers nothing at all. Lickerhead grabs back his postcard, the irritation igniting his face. Baxter flips into funny and charming, just like his porter instructor, Edwin Drew. "Looks like their husbands forgot to buy them coats," says Baxter. Lickerhead sniffles a laugh through his nose and throws his head backwards onto his pillow. And I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Suzette. This is such an interesting time in our country's history, and I'm curious, like this story allows you to explore the intersections of race, sexuality, and class through the prism of your main character, Baxter. And I'm kind of curious about the genesis of the story. Can you talk a bit about where the story came from for you?
Yeah, sure. So years and years ago, maybe 18 or 20 years ago, an old creative writing professor of mine he said to me, "Suzette, you have to write about the sleeping car porters." And at the time, I didn't know what he was talking about. I had no idea. And so I thought, okay, you know what? I really respect this guy, so I think I'll just do a bit of research. And so the reason he was so interested in sleeping car porters, he's a biracial Chinese guy, he's not a black guy, was because when he was a Boy Scout, when he was about 15, he was riding a train to a scout jamboree or something like that. He struck up a conversation with a porter, and my friend Fred likes to play the trumpet, and so he was talking to the porter about this. And then one night, the porter pulled out a trombone and kind of did like a little song for the kids. Anyway, so I started doing research into this, and as I was going, I was realizing that it kind of, or I felt it had nothing to do with me, that it was something that was more specific to, say, Toronto, Montreal culture, or Vancouver culture, maybe Winnipeg, and nothing to do with me in the prairies. I certainly didn't think I was related to any sleeping car porters, so why should I bother? But then as I was doing more and more research, I realized that a couple of things. I realized that the sleeping car porters were incredibly important in terms of the development of the Black middle class in both the US and in Canada, and they went on to, inspire other generations. So Oscar Peterson, the famous pianist, and his sister Daisy, their dad was a porter and, just wanted a better life for them. And while I was doing research, I had a moment of kind of epiphany, because I thought all the sleeping car porters were mostly American. They had immigrated from the US or wherever. And I found out that the Canadian Pacific Railway, I think it was that train company, was actively recruiting people, recruiting men from the Caribbean, specifically from the Bahamas. And my mother's from the Bahamas. And so it was suddenly a moment of, wait a second, maybe I am, maybe there is a connection. And then I started thinking about, well, what about the queer guys? What were they doing? And really, after years and years of research, I never did really find evidence of a queer sleeping car porter, even though, of course, they're there, except for one entry in a criminal, in a court record, like a criminal report, that talked about a janitor named Edward L., who was caught and was arrested for gross indecency after participating in sexual relations with a sleeping car porter named Davis. And I contacted the historian, and the historian said, yep, Davis was a Black man, and he was in his 40s, a married man, an upstanding Baptist. And so that's sort of where the door unlocked for me, was with Davis. And so I dedicate the book in part to Davis.
Oh, that's wonderful. As I mentioned in your introduction, you're up for the Giller Prize, and November 7th is right around the corner, and you must be a very kind of anxious time, a very busy time for you. So I appreciate you taking the time to read today. And also reading your bio, you have won or been nominated for the awards. And I'm just kind of curious, what have literary awards meant for you in your career? How do you approach them or kind of accept? Because I know it can kind of be a two-way street too for sometimes. So can you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I've been on juries, and my early work, and actually the book before this one didn't get a lot of attention. And so, I've always thought of awards and prizes, or, as sort of crapshoots. It's just sort of like, the 3 people on the jury that year, or the 5 people on the jury that year, they decided your book is good. That doesn't necessarily mean that your book is good, or that your book is not good if it doesn't make it on. And so I've always been kind of suspicious of awards, because that same friend, Fred, I remember him talking to this writer, B.P. Nicol, who'd won the Governor General's Award. And he said to B.P. Nicol, congratulations on being everyone's second choice. So the idea that you're the compromise that everybody could agree on. So, that's to say that I'm a little bit suspicious of awards, but it sure is nice. I've had a couple books where it's kind of like dropping a pebble down a well, where you never hear from it again. And it sure is nice to get a bit of validation, but really in the end, for me, it's about, do I love doing it? I love doing it. I will always do it. It kind of doesn't matter, so awards are terrific, but that can't be the reason to do it.
Well, we're rooting for you. We'll be tuning in November 7th.
Oh my God, no pressure. Thanks.
No pressure. Thank you, Suzette. And speaking of BP Nicol, we're just going to go right to James. Our next reader is Matthew James Weigel. Matthew is a Dene and Métis poet and artist born and raised in Edmonton, currently pursuing a PhD in English at the University of Alberta. He holds a Bachelor of Science in Biological Sciences. He is the designer for Moon Jelly House Press, and his words and art have been published by people like Arc Poetry Magazine, Book Hug, The Polyglot, and the Mamawi Project. Matthew is a National Magazine Award finalist, Nelson Ball Prize finalist, Cecil E. McTaggart Award winner, and winner of both the 2020 Vellum Chapbook Award and the 2021 BP Nicol chapbook award for his chapbook. It was Treaty, It Was Me. His debut full collection, Whitemud Walking, recently won the Alcuin Society Award for Book Design and is available now from Coach House Books. Recently, Matthew was also shortlisted for the Writers' Trust Dane Ogilvy Prize, which is presented annually to a Canadian writer from the 2S LGBTQ community for a debut book in any genre. Welcome, Matthew. So Matthew, I have a few questions for you too, but maybe I'll ask them at the end too. So if you want to take it over from here.
Sure. Yeah, that's totally cool. Thank you so much for having me, everyone. I'm very grateful to be here in this space with such amazing, talented writers. And thank you for your readings so far. It's been a real pleasure, a real treat. Apologies for moving around a lot today. My back is yet another chronic flare-up, so it's been a little bit of a challenge to stay in one spot, but I'm doing my best. Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, my work is something that kind of culminated in this book, and that work has always been a sort of a research practice or an inquiry-based practice, especially in my relationship to the land and to the history of the place that I live on and live with. And so I end up spending a lot of time in libraries or in the archives, especially. But this time I'm in the library that Canada keeps my kin in. And I brought all of the other libraries that I've ever been in with me. There's my mom's library, where as a child I saw a pop-up dinosaur. Then rows of shelving, drawers I thought must hold so many fossils. And there's my dad's library of tapes in the car. My favorite songs are the ones that tell a story. And we drive all day. My dad tells stories. And I thought, every story must be a layer in the earth of stories. And I thought, it's the stories that are in front of you that you remember the best. And so this time I'm in a library. It's full of glass to let the sun in. But all the books are in metal boxes and stacks and rows of other metal boxes, all inside this concrete box. And the glass walls let the sun in, and it's warm in there. And I am warm, holding my coat and my sweater and my bag and all the other things that are not my name. That I write on the clipboard. And it is not lost on me that I am here to see my great-great-grandfather's signature, and that I must offer mine to the library first. You see, in this library, they hold the layers of the thing called Canada, and they keep it in a vault, and behind it is another vault. Across it is another row of vaults. And I can see the vaults, but no, I cannot see the vaults. Beyond us is the new building. The building, they tell me, will be staffed by robots, arms of a safer temperature, reminding us that to touch a document is to take a piece of it with you and to leave a piece of you behind. And it is this exchange that we must climate control in a de-reciprocal programming. And when only the dead and programmed can see my kin, no one will see my kin. See me and my layers, proclamation by the king, with a line down its center. And this layer is the treaty, this layer is the treaty, this layer is the treaty that cuts through the center of me. Whereas, in a line of red ink beneath, whereas, in a red ink, her majesty. Whereas I am a measure of a constitution, my kin and marked by hand, tooled in a border of fading gold foil and with a spine that is no longer structural, but splayed on a table and numbered. Thank you. Let's take a quick drink. So this is my first time reading for an audience outside of Canada. And so it's a real pleasure to be invited into this space, as virtual as it is. I appreciate it, and cherish the opportunity. So I think I'll take the opportunity to do a little bit of explanation about some of the work that I do, because as of course we all know, explanations make the poetry much better. So I will say that in order to occupy territory, British law required that Indigenous title to the land be extinguished through exchanges that went by the name of treaty. Following this practice, the United States made hundreds of such treaties with Indigenous nations. And this lasted until an 1871 Act of Congress made it illegal to recognize these nations as sovereign, ending the making of future treaties. In that same summer, Canada and the Crown would begin the process of negotiating the numbered treaties of the Northwest. Here in the Northwest, these rigorous negotiations by my ancestors and relations occurred in defense of a different expectation of the treaty-making process. Here, treaty means reciprocity and obligation. Here, treaty lasts forever. So part of that treaty-making process were the numbered treaties of the Northwest, which were essentially the largest exchange of unceded territory. I say exchange, but really I mean theft of unceded territory in the history of the world. And the treaty number of the land I'm on currently in Edmonton, Alberta, is treaty number 6. And at that negotiation, at a place that went by many names, but one of them was Bayonan, the treaty commissioner, representative of the Crown, Alexander Morris, said, "I will ask the interpreter to read to you what has been written, and before I go away, I will have a copy made to leave with the principal chiefs." Did you know where the river would take you when you first saw it? Watched it bend toward you, wrap you up in school and bridges in a loop. Watched it swim away, even as it still holds you. Wait here. This is where we'll meet, at Bayonan. Did you know how much you would resemble an ocean? Gather everything, who you are, wait and gather, wait and gather. These are things that the river says here. It speaks again downstream. Wait and gather, wait and gather. Stories, gather, witness, gather, sharing. Did you know that when you wrote this down, the river would remember it? I'll do a couple more. I think if I'm okay on time. This poem is about the land that my family comes from in the north. It's mostly called the Northwest Territories, but for us it is called Denende, land of the people. We drowned the land of England in the waters of Denende. It was clearly understood there was no ownership of land. So clearly does the land in fact own me. My water from the river, and my nitrogen a buffalo protein. I am a flesh-bound manuscript of what this place might say. Hear in it how family made the treaties. Live them, love the land, this place, this creek, this river. Make a sediment of me, make mud, make silt, and send it on its way. Saskatchewan, Athabasca, Slave, Mackenzie to the sea. If you could take the dirt of England and rejuvenate the ground, if you could manage as was always done, as people and the beavers manage, take the soil of England, cast it in the lakes across the north, and ball it up in handfuls, homes and dams, and hold the land of England to account for Canada, for the bishopry, for the company, and record it in the manuscript of the Northwest. And then write these things that we are saying down, write them on 2 sheets, one for you and one for me to keep. Hold these things we learn and teach them on. Tell the story written in the mud, recorded in the river, and copied days downstream. Then I would hope you carry save your copy. And when you reach the sea, find England, compare it with this copy we have made, and stir the ocean with it. Thank you. How am I on time? Am I?
Cool. I think, could we do one more, Matthew?
Yeah, one more. Okay, we'll do this one, which is not an ode to the day I fell off my bike and skinned my knee. In the gravel alley, behind my cousin's garage, a day that the land took a piece of me. And I had learned to ride a bike so late that I did not have the same confidence and momentum that I had had in gravity. And when you're a child, you hold yourself in an inward way when you cry, in a way you can no longer hold yourself, in the way that the land holds you, and in all limbs and all joints way. My blood looked so red, strained, and dossed through what was left of skin and dust and gravel stuck to the knee. It was the land that was stuck to me while I was extruded. And on that day, I gave something to the land, and I resented giving it up. And this is not an ode to that day, or to the day I was bullied and thrown in a lake because I was too small and too fat and too much. The day and many other days I felt so small and not enough. So although this is an ode to a day in the valley when I gave to the creek that gave me, this is not about tobacco or a lesson from a snake that growth sometimes means you leave a part of yourself behind. But for that bright day, in a lush overwhelming of green in a mosquito summer, where you were not bit as long as you kept moving, with porcupines and a path past depressions and grass where deer had been sleeping, flowers and driftwood with tiny spiders, pools with even smaller fish, and with water that cut so long into the earth that made a space for all of us. Thank you. R.C. Cho.
Thank you, Matthew. Those were wonderful. And, I know poems come from many different places, and a lot of these were very personal. Can you talk a bit about like how this collection came together? Like what was the starting point, and how did you decide what to kind of include?
Yeah, that's a really good question. The short answer for the first part is that I first saw the Treaty 6 parchment copy that the University of Alberta has in its collection about 3.5 years ago. And it came with a lot of questions. We didn't know where it was printed, when it was printed, how many copies were made, who it was supposed to go to but did not receive it, and all sorts of things like that, and how the university came to have it. And so I just took all those questions and tried to do my best to answer them. And I answered probably almost none of them, but I did come up with a lot of other interesting things. And about 3 years after that, basically 3 years exactly to the day that I saw the parchment, is we sent the book to the printers. And so it was a long process of sort of curation and assembly and design and lots of behind the scenes work that go into making a book that most folks don't bother with when they pick it up and they hold it and read it. And that's when we do a job well, it makes the reading easy. So.
In addition to be really skilled with words, you're really skilled with design. So I mean, if you just go on your website, there's a lot of wonderful work that you do in terms of the art. So how does your poetry intersect with your art? Well, like, I know they're both arts, but you know what I'm saying? How does your kind of like the words intersect with the images and the design that you do?
Yeah, that's all. That's a really great question as well. I think it does so in a lot of different ways, and primarily I would say that well, the short answer is that I like to look at a book as a sort of an artistic medium. It is in the same way that like painting or drawing or filmmaking is an artistic medium. The book is that way, and so the poetry intersects with the creation and the design of the work in a visual sense, mostly through what does it mean to read something? What does it mean to hold the document? Where did that paper come from? Where did the words come from in your body when you thought them up or they came to you? And so there's a lot of things about the reading practice, like I said, that people don't think about. And that's because the book is a piece of technology that has been incredibly refined to be able to tell you things very quickly and easily. And so if you can play with that and you can make people rethink how they read, or to even think at all that they are currently reading something, that can be a very powerful technique. And so when my work is about the material and documents and documentation, I think that it sort of intersects with the words, which are, and the design in a very generative way. I hope that helps.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Matthew, congratulations also like on the Dana Ogilvy nomination. Also we'll be rooting for you. So that also happens, I believe, in November. So so again, thank you for being here. All right, we'll move to our final reader of the evening. Our final reader is Jane Walsh. Jane is a queer historical romance novelist who loves everything Regency. I love it too. She is delighted to have the opportunity to put her studies in history and costume design to good use by writing love stories. She has a great debt of gratitude to the local coffee shop for fueling her novel writing endeavors. Jane's happily ever after is centered on her wife and their cat and their cozy home together in Canada. I also have some questions for you, Jane, after your reading. So, but I'll hand it over to you right now. So please welcome Jane.
Sounds great. Thank you, Chris. This has been such a fantastic hour of readings. I have loved every single one of them that have gone before me, and I feel very honored to be included tonight. So thank you very much, Chris, for extending me the invitation, and thank you to Greg for hosting us tonight. It's been really, really a pleasure. So tonight I'm reading from The Inconvenient Heiress. This is my fourth book. I write queer regencies, specifically sapphic regencies. And basically, if you've ever watched Bridgerton on Netflix and you wished it was a lot more gay, then this is kind of the book for you. So I'm going to be reading from the beginning of this book. So there's not a whole lot of intro that I can give, I suppose, to the specific scene. But basically, this book is a friends to lovers, rags to riches, Regency romp. So it's very lighthearted. It's very fun. And it's about two best friends, two spinsters, who are secretly pining for each other. And the book is basically about kind of their courtship as they navigate the marriage mart and the social hierarchy, like in their village of Inverleigh, which is it's a town that I've made up. It's in the south of England. So the year is 1813, and let's see what's happening. Caroline Reeve hadn't been born with a head for figures. She felt the pain of it every time she sat down at the household ledger and tried to justify a joint of beef for dinner instead of another night of pigeon pie. She thumbed open the thick book, her temples aching when she saw last week's tally of what she owed to the grocer. It was difficult to economize in a family of 6, and finding new ways to squeeze their savings was an endless task. What little money Papa had left them seemed to slip through her grasp faster than a fistful of sand. She blew out a sigh and picked up her pen with the gravity of a judge. It was never any use to run away from the facts. Will had spilled ink all over his Sunday trousers, and now she needed to find enough coin for new ink and new clothes, or she could never show her face again in front of the vicar. Reverend Thompson was good enough to tutor her brothers without charging for the lessons, and she couldn't have them showing up to church full of stains after all his help. Giggles and the clacking of shoes announced the presence of her two sisters before they bounced into the room. Betsy was tall and slender, with a mass of brown curls framing her cheeks, and Susan was short with dark blonde hair that she was fond of arranging into intricate braids. The pair of them were inclined to model their looks after naughty milkmaids, hiking their skirts as high as they could without appearing completely brazen. Caro, darling Caro, we are going out, Betsy announced, tying her straw bonnet beneath her chin with a bright purple ribbon that Caroline couldn't recall paying for. She hoped it hadn't been begged from a suitor. Her pride was hanging by a shred among the shopkeepers, and she couldn't bear it if they thought her sister's shameless on top of it all. Susan peered over her shoulder and wrinkled her nose. Figures again, Caro? Do you not ever do anything fun anymore? Caroline tugged one of her braids. Not unless you wish to live on scraps of butter spread on crumbs of bread. Susan sighed and moved away. You worry too much. Everything's all right these days. The Reeve family is doing just fine. Caroline bit back the retort that they were only doing fine because she took care of it all. Heading to the shore, are you? To town, of course. Town is ever so much more diverting than the boring old sea. Betsy fluffed her curls, and she and Susan dissolved into giggles again. Once visitors started to arrive from London for the summer, their attitude would change, and then Caroline would hear nothing from dawn to dusk but rapturous praise for the endless diversions of the seaside. Stay out of trouble, she told them, and be home in time for dinner. And above all, behave like ladies. The door slammed shut before she finished admonishing them, but it was nothing that they hadn't heard from her before. Betsy was the second eldest Reeve at 23, and Susan was but a scant 14 months behind her. Either of them ought to be helping more with the accounts and the household chores. But it didn't matter how old her siblings were. Caroline would always be the eldest, and she couldn't bring herself to burden her family with the responsibilities that were her duty to shoulder as best she could. After all, she had made a promise. She slumped over the ledger and tried not to be envious of a trip to town that she didn't even want. She wasn't young enough to be distracted from her problems by ribbons, and she'd never been interested in making eyes at the local lads. An hour and a half a half hour and a page of scrawled numbers later, Caroline pushed the ledger away. It was mid-afternoon on Wednesday, after all, which was her favorite time of the week. In fact, she rose to her toes and peered out the kitchen window to be rewarded with the sight of Arabella Seton ducking into her brother's house next door, right on time. I'm afraid the tea isn't fresh, Caroline called out when she heard the front door creak open. Though she wasn't worried that Arabella would turn up her nose. It was all too common for her to be offered twice or even thrice steeped tea in the Reeve household. Arabella wandered into the kitchen. She wasn't a woman who rushed, moving at the slow pace of life in Inverleigh. She was a dreamer, as optimistic as could be, and Caroline's very best friend. She was short and soft and comfortably plump all over, without an angle to be found on her anywhere, and Caroline had looked. Her spectacles perched on her snub nose, her round cheeks, the color and shape of a ripe peach, flushed at the slightest attention, provocation, or surprise, and her elbows and wrists had little dimples in them where the bend was, instead of sharp bone. Even her honey brown curls were short and full, bouncing around her face under her bonnet. Caroline preferred to think of her as adorable or sweet, both of which she was in spades. After all, Arabella wouldn't be interested in anything more, and Caroline had sworn off the idea of any kind of dalliance with anyone who lived in Inverleigh, sticking to uncomplicated affairs with visitors' companions or fellow spinsters who were in town for a few days at most. It helped prevent her from thinking of Arabella's other assets, which distracted her eye far more than comfort. Her lush bosom, peeking above the neckline of her muslin evening dresses, her full bottom, which often pressed close to her own on benches and picnic blankets, her curved lips, overlarge and meant for kissing. Caroline poured the tea with a little more force than necessary. I brought you a book from the library, Arabella announced, the same as she did every Wednesday. She set her reticule on the table and fished out a slender novel from its depths, spilling a trail of ginger comfits along with it. She thrust the book at Caroline, accepted a cup of tea in return, and sat down in a rickety wooden chair that she knew from long experience exactly how to balance against the table at the right angle to stabilize it. It's the very newest Inverleigh has to offer, scarcely 2 months behind London this time. She beamed and pushed her wire-framed spectacles up the bridge of her nose. She really was adorable. Thanks, Belle. I appreciate you going to the trouble. Caroline didn't have time for novels or money for a subscription to the Lending Library. She couldn't help squeezing in moments of reading here and there among the chaos that was the Reeve household, and Arabella knew it. It was no trouble at all. Arabella sipped her tea and rebalanced the chair. I picked up a new book on painting techniques for myself. Arabella sold watercolor landscapes to the visitors that swarmed the seaside each summer. Inverly made for pretty pictures, with its dramatic cliffs and walks, its shimmering sea and sandy shores, and the quaint village life that charmed Londoners out of coin every year. Caroline frowned. Most of the coins Arabella earned ended up in her brother's pocket. Is Matthew going to stay out of it then? She asked, scowling down at the book. I might talk to him, Arabella said. Her pretty face was full of clouds. You do that, Caroline said, and if he doesn't listen to you, then I'll come over and set him to rights. Arabella laughed, her face clearing. I know you would, but I wouldn't ask it of you. You have too many family troubles of your own to handle mine as well. Caroline had to acknowledge the truth of it. She always had her hands full of Reeve problems. Arabella scooped up her reticule. Well, I should be going. Shall we walk together to the Martins' dinner party tomorrow evening? I should like nothing better. Betsy and Susan promised to stay home and watch the young ones, and I've been looking forward to a free evening for ages. Caroline loved her brothers and sisters and felt a fierce responsibility for their health and happiness, no more so than if they had been her own children. She'd borne the responsibility of them since she had been 18, 9 years ago now. She had no regrets. Sometimes, though, in a quiet moment before falling asleep, Caroline wished for more opportunity for frivolity and leisure, more money, more family to help her shoulder the responsibility, but they had no aunts or uncles or cousins. It was one reason she was so grateful for Arabella, and why she would never act on her attraction to her. It wasn't worth risking the friendship of the most important person in her life outside of her family. She pushed those thoughts aside, like her admiration for Arabella's curves. Neither had a place in her life. She was dedicated to her family, and everything else was a distraction she could no more afford than the joint of beef for dinner. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. So you said 4 books, and I believe they all came out during the pandemic. Correct me if I'm wrong.
They did. I'm a pandemic writer. The comment about writing in coffee shops was when I was publishing my first book, because that I wrote in 2019, and I did write in coffee shops. And it's something that I would like to return to at some point, but haven't really in the past couple of years.
But the book actually came out during the pandemic, correct? The first one?
Yes, November 2020 it came out.
So you've been doing I guess online events at so you've not been able to have I guess an in-person traditional launch yet, have you, or have you?
Everything's been online. The only in-person publishing event that I've done was actually last week in Provincetown in Women's Week. My publisher, Bold Strokes Books, they hosted a week-long kind of book series where there were signings, readings, panels, that kind of thing. So I was down there for a couple of days and actually got to meet readers, meet fellow authors, and it was amazing. It really is a game changer when you've been doing the virtual events for so long. And the virtual events are wonderful, and it's a great opportunity to meet people, especially in different countries that you don't have the opportunity. But there's something about the warmth of the in-person crowd that is just amazing. And it was really a great opportunity.
Okay, well, when we do another in-person Violet Hour too, I'll make sure that you get a chance to read it that one too.
That would be great. Thank you.
So I'm curious about the Regency period. It seems to also be a very kind of thing that a lot of people are hungry for. You mentioned Bridgerton. What is it, I guess, about that time, and then also about the queerness that inspires you so much?
Well, I grew up reading Regencies. My mother was a big romance novel fan, and there are many, many romance readers that actually did start by stealing their mothers or their aunts or their cousins when they were probably too young for them, but that's neither here nor there. So it's been a genre close to my heart for so long. So I always knew that someday I was going to try to write one. There was never a doubt in my mind that I was going to sit down and do it at some point or another. And by the time that I got around to writing one, I was in my 30s, and I'm happily married to my wife. And I really wanted to incorporate queerness into my writing. It felt more authentic to me than writing a straight romance. There are a lot of queer Regencies, but it's mostly gay, it's mostly male. There are some sapphic authors, but it's not a terribly large genre now. But it's getting bigger, and it's very exciting to be part of that kind of groundswell.
Yeah, well, I think it also has, yeah, very, if you've already got 4 books, it's great. Someone will discover one and then they'll want to get them all. So that's the
That's
idea.
dream.
All right, well, thank you so much, Jane. And that's it. I think we're kind of at the end of this evening. It went by very, very fast. I want to, give a big thank you to our readers. Please help me join in thanking them. Suzette Mayr, Matthew James Weigel, and Jane Walsh. Also, again, a big thank you to Greg and the team at Bureau of General Services Queer Division. This is just a taste of like what Canada has to offer. So if you're tuning in from the States and very curious, check us all out. But also there's a plenty of queer writing coming out of Canada at the moment. And if you're ever in Montreal and want to check out a Violet Hour, please feel free to follow Violet Hour Reading Series on Facebook. We also have a book club where we devour classic and contemporary works of LGBTQ literature, some Canadian, some international. We try to touch all the different genres. Our next titles are The Heart Laid Bare by Michel Tremblay, November 12th, and then also Cantoress by Carolina de Robertis on December 10th. And yeah, there's also a monthly Violet Letter newsletter with information on queer books and literary events. You can sign up for it at my website at ChristopherDiRaddo.com. So I don't know, Greg, do you have any kind of closing statements? No?
No, just thanks everybody. It was really enjoyable. It was a real pleasure. And if any of you are in New York sometime, please stop by the Bureau and say hello.
We definitely will. And thank you everyone also for tuning in and joining us from wherever you're tuning in. Tonight was very special, so thank you very much, and good night.
Night, everyone. Thanks so
Bye.
much.
Thank you.